All right. Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great afternoon so far. Welcome to this webinar of the Google Certificate Program by Women for Cyber. Today we have with us a very special guest, Michelle Edmondson. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us today. Before giving you the floor, please allow me to introduce you to our students. Michelle is a co-founder and managing partner of Edmondson Group Talent Access. And in this role, I'm sure she will let you know more about it, but she is able to combine her two passions, which are the ones that bring her here today for this webinar. And those are educator and educational leader and a recruitment consultant. Given this background, she's here today to inspire you on how to create your best possible CV and improve your personal branding through great communication skills. And I believe she would also touch upon the best use of your LinkedIn profile. I'll give you the floor, Michelle. Thank you again very much for joining us. And I hope everyone enjoys it.
Thank you, Saskia. Thank you for that introduction. So, look, I'm just going to share my screen, so just bear with 2 secs. Actually, hang on a second, sorry. Okay, so can you see the presentation there?
No, we could see it for a second, and then I think you stopped sharing or something like that.
Bear with. Okay, can you see it now?
Yes, we can see your screen, and I think it's loading in full screen. Yeah, there we go.
Okay,
perfect.
Fantastic. Okay, so just like a very brief introduction, because Saskia just said basically all the key things there, which is fantastic. So yeah, I'm co-founder and managing partner at Edmondson Group, and we're a search firm that specializes in senior technology, cybersecurity, and go-to-market roles. I specialize primarily in the ed tech sector, but when it comes to cybersecurity, really, I'm across industry. And one of the reasons that I've started to focus on EdTech is because I was in education for 20 years. So like Saskia rightly says, it kind of combines my two passions for putting the right person in the right role, but also I was an English teacher for a long time. So I guess that's what I've put into this presentation as well. There's going to be a little bit of how to write in terms of using language effectively in your CV as well, because you can take the girl out of teaching, but you can't take the teaching out of the girl. So look, the first thing to mention here is that there's a lot of advice out there about how to write a CV. So I've based this on what I think is important and what has the most impact, and regardless of where you are in your career. So these things that I'm about to show you are very easily tailored and very easily adapted. And then, as Saskia said, I'm also, if we've got time, going to talk a little bit about networking and using your LinkedIn profile as well, because I find that it's not always done very effectively. And also nowadays, applying for jobs does not end with a CV. So I think it's really important to talk about that as well. I'm going to stop now and again for questions. But hopefully there'll be time at the end where you can ask questions as well. So after each section, I'll kind of toddle back to the screen and you can ask questions if needs be. So off we go. So there are 3 stages. Did the screen just change for you, Saskia? Can I just ask?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. So there are 3 stages of finding a job or furthering your career. So personal branding, which is what we're going to talk about today. And then finding a job, which is actually a job in itself. So that would be the second thing. If we were doing like a run of these, that would be the second thing that I would talk about. And then obviously you have the interviews. So those are the 3 stages. But the thing that we're going to talk about today is personal branding, which is selling yourself. When we look at finding a job, it's about finding the job you want. And then with interviews, it's what to do and say, questions to ask and how to follow up. So let's focus on the personal branding bit. Okay, so this is the personal branding element of job search, and there are 4 key elements here. So the first thing to consider, which is really important and which a lot of people don't do, they just start randomly applying for things and not really thinking about what they want, is positioning yourself. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. So this is before you start applying, before you even start crafting your CV, you need to have a clear direction. And then everything you do in terms of your personal branding, your CV writing, your networking, all of that can be channeled because you've decided what it is that you want. So we're going to look at things like who you are, where you want to work, how therefore are you going to stand out from the crowd, how can you aim towards some kind of thought leadership pieces. If you have no idea where you're heading, you can't really do any of that. Then obviously we're going to talk about how to construct the CV, and there are different elements to that I want to go through today. And then if we have time, we can talk about what your LinkedIn profile should be looking like, and then how to develop your community. Because what we're not going to do is just send out loads of LinkedIn connection requests, because that just doesn't work. So when I talk about positioning yourself, like I've said here, it's the vital first element in any personal branding and job search, because you've got to decide what it is that you want to do, but more importantly, what you do not want. So obviously that's in terms of the role that you are aiming for. So I still have candidates come to me and say, even though I don't really deal with entry level, I will still get people emailing me and saying, I'd like a job in cybersecurity. And I'll say, okay, what area? And they really can't answer that. Or they only know one little thing about cybersecurity, and that's the thing they want to do. So you need to think about what it is you do want and what you don't want. That can be in terms of geography as well. It could be in terms of salary or culture of the organization. So there are lots of things to think about before we start crafting CVs and so on. So obviously I don't know where you all are with studies and applying for roles and getting roles and so on. So I've kept this relatively generic. So things I will be questioning is what elements of your studies, what you're doing with Women for Cyber, what you're doing outside of that, what interests you the most? What role therefore interests you the most? What experience have you gained therefore that is relevant to that thing that you want? What is it that you still need to do to add relevance? What types of organizations do you want to work with? And we'll come back to this. The reason I say that number 4 is that there are some industries, for example, that you might not want to work for. You might not want to work for something that's highly regulated, for instance. You might want to go into ed tech or, you know, healthcare or whatever it might be. So I think it's interesting to ask yourself those questions as well. So I'm just giving you an example here. So this is how I position myself. If I said I did technology hiring across industry and across geography, that would be enormous. I don't even know where I would start with that. So I'm very clear about my position. So I partner with edtech startups and established companies to build high-performing sales and technology teams. That's what I do. And that's pretty much what my LinkedIn profile says. My wider practice recruits all levels of senior cybersecurity talent for our clients, particularly in the architect space. I'm an advocate for underrepresented groups in this field, especially, and work with organizations as a mentor and coach. So it's super, super clear what I do, not just in my role, but beyond that as well. So there is no doubt from that, you know, what it is I do for a living and what I enjoy doing. So when it comes to you positioning yourself, you could start with things like, you know, I recently completed this qualification or this cert, whatever it might be. My studies focused on this, resulting in, now that doesn't have to be a grade or whatever, you know, a name of a certificate. It just could be resulting in increased knowledge in this particular thing. I'm looking to further my career in what is it that you want to do and how are you going to do it? Because you can translate that into your CV as well. It's not just what you've done, it's how and why. And then what have you done about this? I have undertaken work, internships, voluntary positions with who? And then why did you do that and what have you learned? So if we go back to those questions, I just want you to have a little think about this rather than me just rambling on at you. I want you to have a little think about this now, and I'm going to be quiet for a sec while you do this. So what elements of your studies, anything you've done in security so far has interested you the most? Therefore, what role is it that you are the most interested in. It could be a couple of roles. You don't have to be really specific at this moment. It could be a general area that you're interested in. And therefore, what experience have you gained that might be relevant? Like I say, through what you're doing at the minute with Women for Cyber, what you're doing outside of that, what you've done in terms of work. And then that last one, I think, is super important. What types of organisations do you want to work with? Because I think it's important that you don't just think about the technical aspects, but the cultural aspects as well. So I'm just going to be quiet for a sec just while you think about that. Do you have that direction? If you have any questions, obviously I might just toggle back, and then if you've got any questions, you can ask me. And you'll see as we're going on why it's really important to kind of ask these questions and have a clear direction as to what you want. All right, so some general information or advice that I'll give you here is that we're not going to panic when we start applying for jobs. And the reason that we're positioning ourselves is that we don't apply for literally everything we come across. Because there's no way that you can sit there and tailor 50 CVs a day. And so you'll just be kind of, you know, shooting your CV out to everybody. And then it can get quite, and I just don't know how you would have time to do that. And then it gets quite disheartening when you're not getting the replies back that you want because you haven't tailored your CV. It's not really clear why you want the job that you've applied for. So we're not going to panic apply. You are going to tailor your CV to the role in the organisation. Obviously, there are two types of CV. There's a generic CV that you can send out on the hope that they have a role. But if you are applying for a specific role, then you are going to tailor your CV to that role. It's really important that you do that. If they ask for a cover letter, I'm not going to cover that today, but obviously, you know, you will do that as well. And then the work that we've just done here on positioning yourself, you need to keep that in mind when you're networking or writing content or whatever you're doing. Another good reason that we're positioning ourselves is that when we come to follow people or connect with people on LinkedIn, we're not treating it like Facebook. We are connecting with people that can specifically help us on our journey rather than just connect. So it's really important that you have a clear path in mind. And I'm not saying that's set in stone. Obviously, that can change if something else takes your interest. We're not going to veer away too much, but you need to have some direction. So let's move on to what we call the personal brand toolbox. And there are three things here that are really important to make you stand out. That's the whole point of this, is that you've got your CV, your LinkedIn profile, and your content has got to stand out from the hundreds, thousands of other people that are applying for these roles. So there are three parts to that. You've got your CV, which I'm going to spend the most time talking about today. You've got your LinkedIn profile, because honestly, recruiters will look at that, I would say 9 on 100% of the time. And if a role comes up, they might be searching on LinkedIn and your profile might come up. And if you stand out from the crowd as somebody that will be perfect for a particular entry-level role, then they're going to come to you. If it's just bland and doesn't say anything, doesn't tell them anything, that's not going to happen. And then content we'll talk about as well. So things like blogs, LinkedIn posts, you've got to make yourself stand out as a thought leader. This might sound a bit harsh, but this is from experience. So the key thing to remember that a recruiter's role is not to find you a job. The recruiter's role is to find the right person for a role that they've been given by a client. So like I say, I often get emails that say, I'm looking for a job, can you find me one? I can't do that. That's just too enormous. So that's why you need to stand out so that if they've got a search on, they can come and find you. So you need to prove to them and to the hiring manager, so the person that you're sending your CV to, that you are the right person. So this, I guess, is all about responsibility for your own personal brand. So the basics of the CV are this. So you've got the personal statement, which is that paragraph at the top, that kind of, you know, this is who I am in a nutshell. Then you've got the main body, which is key skills and experience. Then you've got your education. And then obviously a thing to remember there is that you will have multiple CV versions. You'll have your generic CV that you might be sending out to companies on the off chance they've got a role, but then you'll have your CV versions that are tailored for each specific role that you are applying for. Right, so let's get down to the nitty gritty. So this is how you're going to write your personal statement. So there's a thing that goes around a lot that says recruiters spend about 8 seconds on the first read of a CV, fact or fiction. I'd say fact, honestly. So recruiters will probably, regardless of whether or not they're using an ATS, an applicant tracking system, they won't spend much more than that. So I would normally read the personal statement or professional statement, whatever you want to call it, at the top. Then I will read the current role. I might go down to the second role, but I've kind of made my mind up on an initial reading whether or not it's the yes or no pile. And that sounds really harsh, but if you've got 200 applications for a job, you can't spend too much time on every single one. So you have to stand out from the outset. So I would say, honestly, that's probably about right. So your personal statement, and like I say, this has got other names, you know, professional statement, whatever. So it's a short paragraph that sits at the top of your CV. So you've got your name, your contact details, and then professional statement. And it offers the recruiter or hiring manager a really powerful overview immediately of who you are as a professional. Also tells them about the suitability of you for the role and the value that you can add. And there might be some mention of your career goals in there as well. It's the first thing that they see. So it needs to be succinct, it needs to be powerful, it needs to be tailored to the role. You can even use some of the language from the job description. They like to see that as well. And the ATS will like that too. And you've got to make sure that it's, and I know I sound like an English teacher, but because I was, you've got to make sure that it's spelt correctly, grammatically, you know, it's because if they read that first thing and it's absolutely riddled with errors, it does not look good, because the whole point of cybersecurity is attention to detail. So you're going to keep it short and to the point. 2 or 3 sentences will do it, no more than 200 words. You don't want to go on too much, okay? So it should just be a nice short paragraph at the top. Use punctuation to craft your sentences. Don't just write in short, simple sentences. I can do this, I enjoy this, I like this. You need to craft it. So, and I'm going to give you some examples in a minute. In terms of layout, you want to make sure that your font is consistent all the way through your CV. So we're not going to separate sections by using different fonts for subheadings and all the rest of it. You want to keep it nice and consistent all the way through. I'm going to say proofread it a lot during this presentation. And again, because, you know, even for chief information security officers, I'll still get CVs that are riddled with errors and sometimes doesn't quite make sense because they've not read it through properly, or it goes from the past tense to the present tense and I just can't follow what's going on. So once you've proofread it, get somebody else to proofread it as well. Okay, because sometimes when we've written something and we've spent loads of time over it, we miss those little errors. So you can write in the first or the third person. So you can start with I am you know, I have 5 years experience in, that's fine. Or you can write it in the third person. So, you know, a dynamic individual who's worked in the cybersecurity industry for 20 years. It doesn't matter, but be consistent. And I'm going to show you examples of both in a second. If you're writing in the third person, you don't have to say he or she. And that's the same for your LinkedIn as well. I find that really weird, writing about yourself with he or she. Be results driven. I think that's a really key point. If you make a note of anything in that personal statement, talk about results. Don't just do a list of ingredients of things that you've done. And even if you're applying for your first cybersecurity role, there is a way that you can do that, and I'll show you that in a second. And don't waste your time in a personal statement by bombarding the person with lots of adjectives and soft skills. It doesn't really do anything. So if you look at that sentence at the bottom, I am a dynamic self-starter who can hit the ground running, working enthusiastically with a team or independently. It sounds lovely, but it tells me nothing. I know nothing about your experience. I know nothing about the results that you've created for a team. Anybody can say that. It's a bit of a cliche. So, and you've only got 200 words. So get straight into what it is that you've done. What have you learned? What can you bring to a team? So what I've done here is I've written a couple of examples, and this is an example for someone who has no experience practically working in a cybersecurity team. Okay, so they've done qualifications, they're looking for their first entry-level role. But what I wanted to show you is it's still possible to apply your education in the professional statement. So we've got, I am a passionate and driven entry-level professional, eager to embark on a cybersecurity career journey with a focus on governance, risk and compliance. Armed with foundational qualifications in cybersecurity and a keen interest in regulatory frameworks, I am committed to ensuring organisational adherence to industry standards and best practices. I am adept at analysing complex regulatory requirements and translating them into actionable strategies to bolster security posture. With a strong foundation and a thirst for knowledge, I am poised to make meaningful contributions to the dynamic field of cybersecurity, particularly in the realm of GRC. So like I say, this is somebody with no work experience. So first role. So I just want you to have a little look at that. Think about what I've just said about how to write a personal, professional statement, whatever you want to call it, and think about what I've tried to incorporate there, just while I have a little drink of water. Okay, so this is what I tried to do. So first of all, we note that it's written in the first person, and I've kept that consistent all the way through. So I am a passionate and driven, blah, blah, blah. I've got a couple of adjectives in there, but that's not the only thing that I've got. I've not just got a big long sentence that's nothing but soft skills. Now notice that I have positioned myself. This is what I want, and this is what I can do. So I've got keen to start my journey in governance, risk and compliance. That's my direction. Obviously, if it's a specific role that you are applying for, you will tailor it to that. I'm committed to ensuring organisational adherence to industry standards. That's positioning myself. It's what I can do. It's what I've enjoyed. I've mentioned relevant qualifications. Obviously, you would talk about specific things that you've done. So I've just said armed with foundational qualifications. You would put something more specific in there, obviously. Then I've done something I've learned and that I can transfer. So translating them into actionable strategies, etc. And then I've ended with what I'm looking for from my first role in this case. Okay, so even though I've got no industry experience, I've still written a personal statement or professional statement that is very clear in my direction and what I can offer, any company. And hopefully, because quite a lot of entry-level people or people that have had no industry experience won't put that bit in. They won't put the professional statement because they think, well, I don't have anything to say. You've always got something to say. And if you need to add to those things, then you go and you do some online courses or whatever it is you need to do. This one is for somebody that's had 3 years experience. And what you'll see the difference is that it's results driven. So we've got experienced cybersecurity professional with 3 years in the financial services industry, holding CompTIA Security Plus and certified ethical hacker certifications, collaborated with senior management to successfully implement security measures, reducing security incidents by 40%, enhancing network resilience by 30%. So it's very clear to me. I would look at that and go, all right, I've got a handle now on what that person can do. Proficient in network security and penetration testing, identifying and patching vulnerabilities to safeguard sensitive financial data. Again, that's what that person can do. You've only got, this is about 150 words, I think. Currently seeking a role to leverage an outstanding track record of tangible results to fortify cybersecurity defences and mitigate risks effectively. So this is what I'm looking for in my next role. You don't have to put that bit at the end. You might want to put some more results in there, that's fine. But it's results driven, it's really clear, it's got direction, I know what this person's done, and they've put their certs in there as well. And then this last one is a security architect who's got 10 years of experience. I'm not going to read that one out to you. I'll just be quiet for a minute and then you can just read that. But just bear in mind what I've said about how to write it and maybe do like a mental tick every time you can see something I've said. So the reason that I put coupled with a proven track record of aligning security initiatives with business objectives is because at the moment, those are real key buzzwords for this CISO role. So I would have looked at the job description or job advert, and that would have been in there somewhere. So you pluck that out and you kind of bring that into your professional statement. So you absolutely tailor this to the role that you're looking for. I might just come back and just see if there's any questions on the professional statement. Okay, all clear. Great. It takes practice, I'll be honest. So, I would write it 2 or 3 times, keep practicing, show it to somebody. I think, Saskia, we're going to share the slides as well. So you can have a look at the examples and then model it on that. Don't copy it, though, obviously. All right, so let's talk about the main body of the CV. So what you'll do first of all, so you've got your name, contact details, professional statement, and then your main body. So you need to pay more attention to your most current role. So even if the current role that you're doing is not cybersecurity related, what are the skills that are transferable? You can talk about human skills as well, and then how those, soft skills, whatever you want to call them, and the results of that, regardless of the role that you're in at the moment. It's okay to start with an education section. So a lot of people think that you just have to start straight away with your, the jobs that I've had. You can absolutely start if you want to. If you've done some really impressive certs that you're really proud of, start with that. So start with an education section. You put the date that you studied, the title of whatever it is that you studied, and then you can do a couple of 3 dot points about what it is that you learned. And maybe, if you can, how you applied that knowledge. So it's absolutely okay to do that. And then you can go on to the jobs that you've had, the roles that you've had. And again, I'm going to show you how to lay those out in a second. So when you get to talking about the roles that you've had, you've got the company name, you've got the dates, and you've got the name of the role as clear as possible in a separate subheading, maybe in bold, and then underneath your bullet point, what you did. But this is really important. A lot of poor CVs that I see just tell me what the person did, which is lovely, but there is nothing. I'm going to say that word results again. There are no results in there. So I led a team of 60 people and we did this. That's great. What were the results of that? So as soon as you start seeing maybe some data, some statistics, some percentages, that's fantastic. If you had an impact on a particular team, then talk about that. You want to do it very succinctly, but you still need to talk about the results, just like you would do in an interview. Try not to use too much jargon or abbreviations or tech speak. I know that's really difficult as you're applying for roles in cybersecurity, but just in case the recruiter is non-technical, and if you're applying for a role from a job board, you can't always tell. So don't overload it with too much jargon. You might know what you mean, they might not. So if it's a particular qualification that they might not have come across, you might just want to explain that. So put the abbreviation and then explain. Proofread it. I'm going to keep going on about this, but proofread it and then get somebody else to proofread it. You absolutely don't have to go all the way back in time to the first ever part-time job that you had, because it's just not relevant. Okay, so just list the roles that you've done where you can see there is something relevant to the role you're applying for. And if I were you, I would avoid listing soft skills. But we've already talked about that. You might be a dynamic leader who's great at, resilience and patience and adaptability. But unless you can prove that with something, it's just a list of words. So we're looking for results-driven information about you and what you did in these roles. Okay, I'm going to get a bit English teacher on you again. This is another thing that can weaken a CV, and this is the verbs that you use. Oh, I'm just going to have a drink. I think a CV can be kind of broken or made with these verbs. So if you look at the verbs on the left-hand side, so did, made, complete, show, worked, tried, helped, I was. As soon as you say I was, you are completely passive. I was asked to. I was asked to help with something. I was part of a team. It just weakens your position. I made or I completed. Completed is okay, but not as good as accomplished or achieved. I showed, and so on and so on. I tried. Gosh, no, absolutely not. On the other side, we've got things like implemented, transformed, achieved, demonstrated, created or constructed, established, delivered, performed. So these are really kind of dynamic action verbs that could really be very impactful in a CV as well. So really think about how you're crafting. Once you've got this, once you've got the skills and you've done it once or twice, it becomes a lot easier. But if we just say things like, I tried to, it just doesn't sound great. And at the bottom there, I've given an example. So let's say you've put, I was asked to complete an overview of current systems. Okay, that's what you did, and that's fine, but it makes you sound really passive, like you were just part of it. You know, you were being bossed about by somebody, and you probably were. Okay. However, if we change that to, I delivered a detailed overview of current systems, that's far more active. Okay. Makes you sound more dynamic, more successful, like you did this autonomously. You're not fibbing, you're just changing the verb. Okay. So that's a little thing, but it's just, like I say, the English teacher in me coming out, because it's something that can make or break a CV. All right, so again, I've written you an example. So
Michelle, sorry
yeah.
to interrupt. I do have a question about the showing the results of your positions, current position or past positions. Because what if, of course, it's better to show results, and if you have numbers, that's the best. What if you don't have numbers or a percentage that you can present? How do you recommend that you can show the impact that you had in that role without using numbers?
Yeah. All right, so if you don't have numbers or data or percentages or whatever, you can still talk about maybe the impact that you had on a team. You know, did you, say something like, that you drove them to success, or something that you learned, something that you can take to your next role. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, I completed 90% of tickets to a satisfactory level, or whatever it might be. But there has to be something that you've either learned, or that you completed, or, you completed it to a high standard, for instance. That's absolutely fine. So until you've got those kinds of percentages and kind of statistical results, if you like, then what you're putting is something that came about as a result of you doing that thing. Okay. I mean, even that example that I just gave you there doesn't have a percentage to it.
Yeah.
But, delivering a detailed overview of current systems, that's a result.
Yeah.
Because you completed something, and those verbs actually will help you with that as well. If you transformed something, that's a result. If you created or constructed or established, or if you delivered, those are all results. So that's perfectly fine until you've got that kind of, like you say, those kind of statistics or whatever it is behind you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you very much. There's a similar question in the chat. They said, what if you were part of a team passively, like a junior position where you were learning, so you couldn't do really impactful things? I guess the answer is the same. You should also mention the things that you've learned in that position, right?
Right. So if you're a kind of passive team member, then you can talk about, that there must have been something that you did within that team, but also something that you learned, that you took away, that you are now going to implement in your next role. And even if you were part of that, so you can say that, you worked as part of a, whatever the team is, to complete a particular, whatever it is. It's really difficult for me to say without knowing what it was. You can still talk about the role that you played. You must have, even if you were taking instruction and doing something, you would have still completed the thing that you were asked to do. So you can still talk about that. That was still your role within the team. And it still also tells me that you are, you can take instruction, and you are learning, and you want to continue with that learning. That's fine as well.
Okay.
And then maybe with that team, just from now on, just go, can I do that? But this is another thing about positioning yourself as well, is that if you're starting to ask yourself those questions about what if I've only done this, then you can start thinking about what it is you need to do next, so that you can then start putting those things into your resume, your CV as well. Yeah. So like this one, this one here. So just to move on to that next one. So I've written on from the perspective of someone, oh, sorry. Oh gosh, there we go. Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. So I've done this from a perspective of a help desk technician. So this is a real kind of entry-level tier 1 role. Okay, so this person's got no experience beyond this. This is their first role. So I tried to have that in mind all the time when I was putting this together. So you'll see at the top, I've got the name of the company, then I've got the dates that I work there, and then I've got the role title. Okay, so it's really clear, and then I've got my bullet points underneath. Okay, that's really nicely presented. That's all you need. So I've got and look at the verbs that I'm using as well. So responded to user inquiries and technical issues promptly, maintaining a friendly and professional demeanor. Okay, there's not much more I can say about that as a help desk technician. You know, if I was part of a team and like the person said there, if I was working passively, I can still talk about things that I did. Assisted with hardware and software troubleshooting, resolving 90% of issues on the first call. Logged and tracked all support tickets in the help desk system, ensuring accurate documentation of user issues. Provided guidance to users. Escalated complex tech. Now, this is quite interesting. Look at this one. So basically, this means if I couldn't deal with something and I asked my manager to deal with it, but look at the way I've written it. Escalated complex technical issues to senior team members and collaborated with them for timely resolution. So basically what I'm saying is, because of my role, I was too junior to deal with some of these things. So I asked my manager and we worked on them together. But the way that I've written that is, you know, I'm a collaborator, I'm a team member, I'm a team player, and I've learned from people. So there's ways of using language. I'm not fibbing about anything, but there's ways of using language. Participated in training sessions to enhance technical skills and knowledge of company systems. That, you know, businesses are going to love that because you know you're part of that ethos, that culture, that value. Conducted routine system checks, assisted with inventory management tasks, including equipment tracking and replenishment. That's basically who's got what. So you see what I mean about using those verbs to make something sound really dynamic. I could have just said I helped with all of that. I did. But I've tried to adapt my language. And yes, I've got one results thing in there, but the rest of it is kind of what I did, but also what I learned, and therefore what kind of person I am. So there are ways that you can get around that. Is that helpful? Does that make a bit more sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think actually, if I remember correctly, there are quite a few people in that position, so this will be very helpful for them. There's another question in the chat. They ask how many bullet points per role is ideal, or you've had about 4 to 5 roles in over 8 to 10 years.
I would say for your first one, let's see how many I've got there. So I think for your first role, that's probably a nice number, because what you'll find, what you might find, the more experience you get as well, is that the roles that have become before that are, you've done very similar things. If you've done similar things at different companies, you don't have to keep repeating that again and again. So I would say probably that amount of bullet points for the first role, and then maybe 4 or 5 for the next 2 or 3 roles. It depends on how far back you're going. And then what I find some people do is that they just list other relevant kind of roles underneath. You want to try and keep your CV down. I'm not a massive fan of this information that people give, you know, like the ATS only reads the first 2 pages. It's just total nonsense. If you can keep it to 2 pages, then that's great, because a recruiter really doesn't want to be sifting through, you know, reams of paper or scrolling through pages. So probably, yeah, that many bullet points for the first, and then for the second role, 4 or 5, and then because the skills will be repeated and so on. And then when you get down to the last 2 or 3 roles that you did, maybe 1 or 2 roles that are relevant and need to go on your CV, just do the company name, date, and so on. You can always put, you know, more details if needed. I'm really, if I'm looking at it, I'm interested in the last 2 or 3 roles that you did. Because by then I've got an idea of your career path as well. Yeah, does that help?
Yeah, I think that answers the question perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, so overall layout of your CV then is going to go name and contact details, your personal, professional statement, whatever you want to call it, your work experience, or you can put your education first, like we've said, that's absolutely fine. Let's say you've got your work experience first with your titles and your bullet points. Then at the bottom, you're going to put your qualifications and any certs that you've done that are relevant. And then if you've done lots of other kind of, if you're a member of it, well, like, you know, Women for Cyber, you can put that down as an organization. If you've written something, even if it's for LinkedIn, you could put it as like a, you know, an article for LinkedIn, put it as a publication. Any other professional experience or organization that you're involved in that's relevant, absolutely put that in as well. Personal interests. I'm not a massive fan, but you know, like somebody put on a CV the other day, they like rock climbing and spending time with their family, and that's really lovely, but I'm not sure what that tells me. What does that tell me about it, the way that he could do the role? I'm not sure about that. So I guess if you're going to put personal interests, try and make it as relevant as possible. Like, is it a group activity that you do, or, you know, something that requires focus and concentration? I don't know, maybe rock climbing does. I'm not a big fan of, by that point, I don't really read the personal interests. So I maybe tailor that to the role. If they seem like one of those companies that's really, if you've read the job description and it's really about, you know, we're a family and all the rest of it, then maybe put it in. If it's super formal, highly regulated, maybe not. I know that's probably not really helpful. I'm not a big fan. So yeah, but I know some people are. And then just overall tips. So that first one, don't be boring. Be careful making it too elaborate, but when you put your name and so forth at the top, you could have like a coloured strip, you know, with your name, and that could be presented really nicely. I've seen some with like the colour down the side. If it's a really creative industry that you're going into, so let's say that you want to go into gamification or the games industry or whatever, then you could do lots of creative things with your CV. So I've seen that done in the past. If you're not confident with that, then just, you know, nice and straightforward is fine. But when we say don't be boring, I mean with your language as well. Like I say, I tried, I did, I demonstrated. Yeah, look, number 2, please proofread your CV. Make sure if you've tailored your CV, you're getting things like, you know, if you mention the company, it's the right company, you've changed the name, because I've seen that happen before as well. You don't include references. If they want references, they'll ask for them. You don't need to put references on your CV. Some people put a picture on there. I don't like that either. Because that does nothing for diversity and inclusivity. So I really wouldn't put a picture of you on there. And I'll say that to men, women, whoever. I just don't bother. This number 6 is really important because I don't want you to waste your money. So don't pay anyone who says they can teach you how to beat the ATS, because there's no such thing. So a 2-page resume or CV is perfect. Try to use the language when you tailor your CV, use the language that they've used at moments in your CV, because the recruiter will like that. But any company worth their salt won't just rely on an ATS. They'll also have a talent acquisition or recruitment team that's looking at your CV as well. So don't pay anybody that says, I can teach you how to. They can't. It's nonsense. Yes, that's just a little rant. Yeah. All right. Now, any other questions before I move on to LinkedIn?
I don't see any questions in the chat, but of course, everyone, you can also just put your hand up or turn your mic on if you have any questions. This is the time. If not, I guess we can leave them for the end if we have any remaining time. Okay, there is a question here from Precious. She says, I don't know if you can read the chat, Michelle, or should I read it for you?
Was it, how do you tailor your CV to each role?
Yeah.
All right. So, for example, if they call the role a particular thing, then you need to call it that thing. If you know that culturally, you should be able to get a flavour of what the company is like from the job advert, job description. So try and, like I say, you might want to use the language, those buzzwords that they've got. You might want to kind of incorporate that into your CV as well. If they are particularly creative or highly regulated or whatever it might be, you're trying to reflect what they want in your CV through the language that you use and the way that you talk. You're not going to change your experience, but there might be something about your experience that you want to promote more than all the other bullet points. So you'll put that first, because they've said that they're really looking for this thing, because that's really important to them. So you can put that first, and then you put your other kind of bits and bobs. So you should be able to, from a decent job advert, and I'm not for one second saying that they're all decent, because sometimes they're just a big long list of things that they want. But you should be able to get a flavour of who they are, and also you should have done your research as well. So we're not just going to look at the job description and say, right, I'm going to apply from that. You need to go and research the company, because you need to know if they're a company that you want to work for as well. Because like I say, we're not going to panic and just apply for everything. So once you've done your research, once you've looked at the company values and ethos and so on, once you've done all of that and you've looked at the criteria that they've set out in their job description, then you write your CV and you can tailor it. You've got a flavour for who they are, then you can tailor it accordingly. If it's a standard kind of, you know, we need all of this and then we need all of these qualifications, then you just put that in your CV. But it's just, you know, trying to reflect them in your CV as much as possible. I think it's a form of flattery, I guess, isn't it? But it works. And it's obvious if something's just generic.
I have a question, since you've mentioned the requirements listed in the job posting. What if you don't meet all the requirements that they're listed? How do you work around that?
It doesn't matter.
I knew the answer. I just want to
if you go onto my LinkedIn, if you go onto my LinkedIn, you'll see this is something women in particular have a tendency to think they have to tick every box, and you absolutely do not. Think of a job description or a job advert as a wish list. Okay, this is what the recruiter, hiring manager, whatever is you know, wishing they could find in the ideal candidate. Sometimes that recruiter, if they're non-technical, has been handed some job description from, I don't know, the CIO or whoever it might be, or the CISO or whoever, and gone, find me that person. And they don't really know what all these things mean. It's just what they've been told to do. And if there's a desirable section, it drives me insane. It's either needed or it's not. Desirable, what does that even mean? So there are some technical skills that, of course, if it's a highly technical role, that you're going to have to need. There might be some qualifications that you might need. But this is where a really well-crafted CV, professional statement, cover letter, and so on, fantastic LinkedIn profile, this is where this can separate you from everybody else. So, of course, there are some technical things. And then there's going to be, as it goes down the list, there's going to be some things that, you know, you can learn. There are going to be some human skills or soft skills. I don't like the phrase soft skills, but that they list, you know, you've got them. So you really, really don't have to. And if it's a job that you really want, just go for it. What is the worst that can happen? You don't hear from them. That is the worst thing that can happen. They're not going to phone you up and go, I can't believe you've applied for this job. What were you thinking? just apply, you know, because you never know. If you've positioned yourself and you know it's what you want and you've got tunnel vision, it's the ideal role, but you think, oh, I only fit like 70% of the criteria, I don't have all this desirable section, just apply. There was another question about transitioning there as well.
Yes, the question reads, what if you're trying to transition to a new field, but your current field has no relationship with the new field?
God, that's a difficult one. The only thing you can do there is, like I say, try and tailor the what you have done in your previous roles, so that it kind of, you can adapt what you've done to the role that you're looking for. And that's when you would start with your education, because what you've got to show is that you are willing to learn. And then what we're looking for there is a company who are willing to take you on because you have potential rather than experience. That's trickier, honestly, but there's still a way that you can write that CV to talk about things that, say, look, let's say, for example, so I've spoken to a few women recently who have done things like they've been in marketing or finance and they want to get into cybersecurity. So they are either mid-career or even midlife pivoters. And they've said to me, I'm starting from scratch. And my response is, you are absolutely not. So if you've been in something like marketing or teaching, anything like that, where you can communicate the technical to non-technical people, where you've got patience and all those things, where you can sit down and communicate, and also things like business needs as well. Let's not forget that cybersecurity more and more is becoming an integral part of a holistic business. If you can communicate that in your CV as well, those transferable skills, and that's fantastic, but that is a bit more difficult. Yeah, not sure if I answered that question right, but
In that case, would you recommend, so let's say we have this woman working for finance, trying to have a transition into cybersecurity, and they are taking some certifications, some trainings in cybersecurity. Would you, in the CV, would you prioritize your current experience or your education towards cybersecurity?
do you know what? I would maybe trial it. I would do A and B tests. I would trial it with my education first, and then I would send other CVs where I talk about, it depends on how confident you are adapting your past experience to the current role that you're looking for. But if you're going from something like finance into cybersecurity, you know, something highly regulated into cybersecurity, there's a lot of transferable stuff going on there that you can talk about. So I guess it depends on how confident you are adapting information about your current role. And if you're not, then start with the, you know, the qualification that you've done, because what that's showing, because in your professional statement, you will say, looking to pivot into, that will be clear, won't it, from the start? And then you can put your education and it will show exactly what you've done to pivot into cybersecurity.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. So
I don't think so.
How much time have we got left? About 20 minutes. So let's just talk about LinkedIn really quickly. All right, so there's a statistic here that says around 72% of recruiters use LinkedIn when hiring new talent. I actually think that's an underestimation, honestly. So CVs alone, probably not enough anymore. So the talent they hire through the platform is of higher quality than professionals they find through other job sites and methods. So I will often find candidates who are not active on the market, whose CV I've not been sent because I've gone onto LinkedIn, and it doesn't matter what level I'm looking at, okay? So I think it's really important to have that, and it's free. All the tools that I'm going to show you here are completely free, but it's just how you use them. So you're going to have a profile photo. Your profile photo needs to look professional. I'm not saying that you've got to stand there with your arms folded looking really serious, but you want a relatively plain background. If you're willing to pay for things like Canva, you can change backgrounds and so on. But if not, just get someone to take a picture of you, neatly dressed, looking professional, relatively plain background. Then you want your headline, who you are. And you know, you could go and have a look at mine and see what I've written there, but that should be where you position yourself. Okay, so what do you want to do? What have you done? Whatever it might be, but you need a headline underneath. Really, you can make it humorous if you want to. That's your chance to show the CV. The LinkedIn profile is a chance to give you some real personality beyond the CV. CV doesn't really say much about who you are as a person. It says who you are as a professional. And then you want your description as well. And again, you can make that quite witty, quite humorous. Don't go over the top, obviously. But you can come across as, you know, a rounded person. What you're not going to do is treat it as an online CV. So you're not just going to cut and paste your CV onto the About section of LinkedIn, because that is really dull. And then you want to have some really interesting content. I'm going to show you how to do that in a second as well. So when people look at your profile and they look at what you've been sharing and what you've been writing, it's like, oh gosh, she really knows the stuff. That's amazing. We should definitely talk to her. So when you do your LinkedIn banner, I made these for free on Canva. Okay, so these don't cost anything. If you want to pay for it, there's lots more whizzy pictures, but I think these look fine without. So you can do some really kind of simple plain ones, like with keyboards at the background, but you see I've got my email address and my phone number, so people can contact me really easily. You can call yourself, you know, I'll put cybersecurity intern there, but you know, whatever your role is or whatever the role you're looking for, that's fine as well. And then the one at the bottom, you could put a picture of yourself if you wanted to. I like those cityscape ones. I think they look quite nice. You can have one that looks particularly kind of technological, but just make it look professional, because they look like you're already working for somebody. Okay, so we've talked about the headline, talked about the About section. You want your contact information, maybe repeat that in the About section as well. There's a section for you to put qualifications and certifications. Make sure you've done that. The work that you've done with Women for Cyber. And that's when you can put your personal interests. That's when you bring that kind of, this is who I am, onto your LinkedIn profile and really flesh you out as a person. I don't think there's anything else I need to tell you there. So in terms of content, and this is where a lot of people, so they've done all the flashy stuff, there's lovely pictures and banners and it looks beautiful. And then I look at the content and it's just, well, there's nothing there. It's a bit bland and I can't see what their opinion is. It's okay to have an opinion on LinkedIn. So CVs and LinkedIn profiles, LinkedIn kind of judges it up a little bit, but still you need a bit more. So we're going to get involved with the community. Now the beauty, and you've probably already, I'm probably, you know, teaching Granny to suck eggs here. You've probably already seen this, but the community for women in cybersecurity on LinkedIn is incredible, incredible. There are so many, you know, communities to join, people to talk to, people to follow. We are not going to be sending out random connection requests. But people that you can follow just are amazing. And the information that they share on their posts on a daily basis is just fantastic. So you need to get involved. You can write on LinkedIn, you can write articles. You could write a blog, you can link it to, you know, you could use WordPress, you can link your blog into LinkedIn. Join LinkedIn groups. And not just women in cybersecurity groups, but just generally, you know, international groups, because what you're trying to do is you're learning from them all the time. And you're also maybe taking a little bit of information and adapting it, something you really liked, and then you can write your own little article on it. Obviously, we're not plagiarizing. If you're going to copy somebody, then you put a, you know, a reference. And then we start networking to find hiring managers. You start looking at job boards, who's hiring all the time. It might not be the role that you've positioned yourself for, but who's always hiring? Who's the hiring manager? How can we follow them? What do they always write about? How can we comment on what they're writing about? Because the more you do that, the more your name gets out there. So find thought leaders on LinkedIn in your space. So people like, you know, Tanisha Martin, Jane Franklin, just incredible women to follow. And just don't send connection requests unless you've started to build that rapport with somebody. You know, you've written a comment on one of their posts and they've commented back or they've liked it, and that's happened a few times. We've got to build relationships with people. Don't just send connection requests, and please do not send those in-mails that say, have you got any jobs, or I need a job, or I need your help, because people just delete them because they'll get hundreds of them every day. This takes real effort and patience and time to build this network, but it will absolutely pay off. Okay, so this is the last thing that I'm going to teach you, and then I'll stop talking. So there's a guy called Joe Mullings, and he is an American guy who is in med tech recruitment. And he came up with this thing called the 10-4-2 ratio. So every week, maybe more than once a week, you are going to do 10 likes, 4 comments and 2 shares. So once a week, you're going to create a list of 20 people and or companies that you want to engage with. Okay, so it could be a company you've had your eye on for a while. It could be a particular hiring manager. So this is when we go back to positioning ourselves. You know what you want. You know what you're headed for. You know your direction. We're not just going to be following any random person. We need to make this really specific and really purposeful. So yeah, 20 people that you want to engage with, follow them on LinkedIn. So for the organizations you've listed, identify and follow everyone that's relevant to your job search. Okay, so it could be the CISO, the CIO, it could be the CEO. It depends what you're looking for. You know, I don't know, cybersecurity manager, head of whatever they call themselves. And then every week, like at least 10 posts that's been shared by this pool of high value contacts. Okay. And then you're going to try and add comments to 4 of the posts that you like. So rather than just going through and going, you know, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Now and again, just go in, but you only comment if you can add something of value. So don't comment by saying, really like this, because it doesn't add anything. Okay. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll quote them back to themselves. You know, this part, I really engage with this part, quote, because, and then I'll write a little bit, something like that. People don't do that very well, honestly. There's just a lot of liking things and thanks for sharing. Doesn't do anything. So if you start commenting, and I'm not saying that as soon as you send your CV in, they'll go, oh, that's that person that loves my posts. But your name's out there. And also, you're learning all the time about current trends. You're learning about the current market. You'll be seen as someone who actually engages with other people rather than just, annoyingly sends contacts out, connection requests out. You will also get content for your own writing, because the more you're learning, the more that you'll engage, the more that you can write. You'll get to know key professionals. You'll get to learn about the hiring staff. And then when they do advertise a role, you'll know all about them. And then you can tailor your CV. You'll know what they're interested in. And so you can start to adapt your CV that way. And if you've written an article on something that they've really been talking about a lot, then you can put that at the bottom of your CV as well. It's quite sneaky, but it definitely works. And if you have to write a covering letter, you know all about them. You know their values, their ethos, their culture, their direction, because you've been looking at them. But like I say, you can't do this unless you've really thought clearly about what it is that you want, and identified, what you want to do and for whom. And then, choose 2 posts that you find especially insightful and reshare them. So 10 likes, 4 comments, and then reshare 2 things, but reshare them with some, don't just repost with your own thoughts and add some kind of insightful commentary. Fantastic article from whoever it might be about blah, blah, blah. And personally, as whatever you're doing, I found this really resonated with me because thanks for sharing, and then tag them. Yeah. It sounds a bit sneaky, but honestly, it really does work, because it shows that you are genuinely interested, and you will learn so much. Like I say, the network out there is just brilliant. Yeah. Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I want to say, and it is a lot of work, to be honest. And I think it was in one of the first slides where you said that finding a job is a full-time job in itself.
But the thing is, initially it's a lot of work. It depends on how committed you are, but initially, yes, writing a CV and so on is a lot of work. But once you get the rudiments of it down, it's not. Once you get the hang of going on to LinkedIn and just commenting, sharing, and so on, it really isn't. But what I would do with that is just set yourself a timer, because otherwise you'll start doom scrolling LinkedIn, and then you'll be there for 4 hours and you'll have got nothing else done. So set yourself half an hour to do that. That really isn't hard work. But if it works and it gets your name out there and so on, then it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, there's some questions in the chat. Someone is asking how important cover letters are. Do recruiters read them every time?
Look, it really depends on. Some companies have stopped asking for them, and they're just more interested in your branding and your CV. If a recruiter has been asked to get cover letters, or it's part of their process, then yes, they will read them. But they're becoming less and less fashionable. But if you are asked to do one, then you need to do one.
I'll add a comment there, because we're currently recruiting for a position, and we do ask for a cover letter. I think in part because of many of the reasons that you've mentioned, that often CVs do not focus so much on the results and what a person has achieved, and thus then you try to get that information from a cover letter. My comment is, we're finding now with the search in AI that cover letters all look the same.
Yeah.
So just an advice, grade it yourself. You can always use AI for structure and recommendations, but it needs to be personal, because as Michelle was saying, you're going to go through a lot of CVs and cover letters. And if you feel like you've already read that one, but you have not, that cover letter definitely is going to the no pile.
Yeah, it's such an ideal opportunity to showcase what you've learned about the company. You shouldn't really be applying for a role unless you've looked at who they are. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's just standard, I would say.
There's another question from Miriam. She says, what if you're transitioning but haven't worked for several years? For example, worked in a bank within AML, become a mom, and then haven't worked for a long while. How will you brand yourself to potential employers?
Gosh, look, the only thing you can do there is just follow the advice that I've given, and then just be honest. So, where there's a career gap, I think people are becoming more, oh no, tolerance, not the right word. What's the word? Understanding of that. So if you put, you know, career gap in order to, you know, look after child, blah, 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 that's, there's nothing else you can do with that, I don't think. If there's something that you did while you were, you know, at home with baby or whatever, but I mean, who's got time for that? I didn't. I just, yeah. You've just got to be honest. If there's a career gap, there's a career gap. But again, what you do is that you really emphasize what you've done, you know, since, in order to either pivot into cybersecurity or to, you know, re-enter the career.
Yeah. I do not have any children, so this question might be a bit stupid, but would you say, because I imagine when you become a mother, you do work on several skills. One of them would be patient, as you've mentioned before. Would you try to introduce that in your CV somehow?
You could probably do that, and if they ask for a cover letter, but I'm not sure how you would do it as part of a CV. I might come back to you on that question, because it's not, I've not seen anybody do that, but that's not to say that you can't do that. Honestly, I would just say, you know, career gap in order to, and then just be honest with what you've been doing. I think it's when you start saying, you know, being a mum taught me to be resilient and patient.
Yeah.
It's a bit
Yeah,
contrived. So yeah, so I wouldn't. Yeah, no, I wouldn't do that. No. Oh, someone's just asked really good. I just saw 2 questions pop up. Yes, you can. I've said that you can have the presentation. That's absolutely fine. And the second one, how do you transition from teaching into cyber? Oh my God, it's such a great question. You are so. You should apply just for everything. If you've done those kind of qualifications and you know what you want to do, you have the soft skills to go into cybersecurity that you would not believe. The attention to detail that you have to have, the ability to work on your own as a team, the resilience, the patience, the ability to get people working, the way that you can translate the technical into the you know, to your non-tech savvy, whoever. You've got phenomenal skills as a teacher to go into any other role, actually. And I wish I could tell teachers this more. You can also earn a lot more. Yeah.
They're asking whether there will be a video of the presentation. That's, well, it is being recorded, but we need to discuss that with Michelle offline before. But we definitely will share the slides that you've seen. Let's see, any other questions? Is it better to combine cybersecurity with marketing or pivot? Pilot from Nofiset.
I would say that you'd be pivoting into cybersecurity, but like I say, that's not to say that your skills as somebody who's been in marketing. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. That's not to say that your skills in marketing are not really relevant. That's a really good question.
I guess that question goes to your first, one of your first slides of to know where you want to go, right? Because you might be interested in cybersecurity, but also marketing. And of course, you could work for as a marketing person for a cybersecurity company and have both angles without.
Right, absolutely. And then you can kind of learn on the job. And I think it also depends on the job that you're going for. If you're going for a highly technical coding kind of role, then you know you are starting somewhat from scratch. But if you're going into more kind of policy or, you know, compliance or regulation or you know, something that doesn't necessarily have those highly technical skills, then you're transferring up to a point. But they are quite different, yeah, in terms of their aspects, yeah.
There's an interesting question. Okay, questions are common. First one, if you're applying for different roles, how can you maintain your LinkedIn profile such that it aligns with the different roles? Or do you maintain a profile for the different roles?
You can't be talking about all the different things that you want to do. Your LinkedIn profile, just see it as a way to showcase who you are as a person and your interest in cybersecurity. It goes back to what I said about positioning yourself. So you really shouldn't be looking for roles that are really disparate or lots of different roles in security. You should have a fairly kind of channeled idea of what it is you want to do. So you can be talking about, so say for, oh, right, okay. So you have what are called content pillars. So my content pillars are, I talk about women in technology, cybersecurity. I talk about education technology as product, but I also talk about how to build teams. Those are the three things that I talk about. So you could have content pillars. So you could talk about women in cybersecurity. You could talk about the particular role that you're interested in or roles, and then choose one other thing that's interesting in that field. So you can talk about three, I would say maybe three is fine. 3 content pillars that you write about regularly. And you could have like Mondays, you write about this thing. Tuesday, you do a fun story about yourself. Wednesday, you do an article. Thursday, you know what I mean? You can have like a plan as well. And I usually do my content writing, you know, maybe on a Sunday, I'm watching a bit of telly or whatever, and I just sit and write some content. And look, I agree with what the person said before. You know, it is hard work up to a point, but if it gets you that role that you know you really want, then it pays off. Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
We're getting quite a few questions, and thanks about the presentation. Someone said, I think we've already answered this question before, but she's saying, I think I have a lot of soft skills, but I don't know how to showcase them on the CV, as it is better not to list them in. And then it is stopped.
So you can mention them, but what we're not going to do is do that. I'm a dynamic, resilient, adaptable team player who, because that doesn't mean anything. So you can say, I am a dynamic team player who has, and then back it up with something that you've done. So if you think that you're particularly patient or resilient or adaptable or, you know, honest or authentic or whatever it might be, you absolutely mention it, but then give me some, because that could just be words, couldn't it? I could say all sorts about myself, but you don't know that that's true. So try and back it up with something. You know, how do I know that you are resilient? What's happened in your role where you had to really think on your feet or whatever it might be?
Thank you very much. Okay, one last question. There's some requests for your LinkedIn profile, so I'll put it in the chat. So last question was asked twice. 1 second, I can't find it here. From Victoria, she's saying, I am pivoting into cybersecurity from my current role as a support worker for young adults with challenging behavior. Does this seem far-fetched? If not, how do I tailor my CV to fit in?
Right. So again, I would start with education. So all the stuff you've been doing with Women's Cyber, anything else you've been doing, any open university, there's a lot of freebie stuff out there, which is fantastic. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's not particularly expensive as well. Is it Udemy that does lots of cases? They're courses, they're pretty good. So anything that you've done that's specific. And then again, I think same as teaching, there's a lot of skills. You know, I'm guessing that you've been fairly autonomous in what you've done as well. You know, you've done you know, planning and, you know, creating resources or whatever it might be. I think, you know, and time management and all of those things, I think those are all things that are relevant. But like I say, so you put the thing that you've done, what you've learned, how you applied it. Yeah, and again, in that's what that professional statement can do as well, is it really talk about what you've done in your previous employment, but how you're going to transfer it into the cybersecurity industry. I don't think it's far-fetched at all.
Great, I guess that's good news. All right, I think that was the last question in the chat. So I think we can close it here. Let me just have another look at the chat. Yes, I think that's about it. So we can leave it here. Thank you very much, Michelle. This was really enlightening. I was just thinking that I hope that I had attended a session like this when I was looking for a job. I think it would have took me way less time to find my first job. And regardless, I still have a lot of work to do on my LinkedIn account as well, on my LinkedIn profile. So I'll start by the 10-4-2 rule starting next week, I think, not this one.
Oh, no, so it was an absolute pleasure. I'm really glad that that you found it helpful. So yeah, and by all means, just go onto my LinkedIn, follow away, have a little look at the kinds of things that I do. I use Canva a lot. So yeah, just have a little look.
We will. I can see from the chat that everyone found them really, really helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
So thank you very much, Michelle, for joining us. It was great to have you on, and speak to you soon. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Evening by now, if you're, well, afternoon, evening, depends where you are.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Michelle. Have a good evening. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.